The world doesn't respond to wishes or daydreams. It responds to conviction. It bends not for those who sit quietly hoping for a better tomorrow, but for those who rise with unwavering belief in their purpose. Most people spend their lives waiting for signs, waiting for approval, waiting for the perfect moment to make a move. But life has never been kind to those who wait. It rewards the ones who act as if the reward is already theirs. When you walk into a room with certainty, people feel it before you speak. They sense something different, not arrogance, but presence. Not loudness, but gravity. This kind of presence cannot be faked, and it cannot be taught in words. It must be built from within, in silence, in solitude, and in decision. The truth is, power is not something that others give you. It's not handed out like a gift. It's recognized when you decide to embody it. The moment you act as if your purpose is real, before anyone believes in it, before the evidence shows up, the world begins to adjust to your energy. That's how influence is born. Not by forcing, but by radiating something so deeply aligned that people can't ignore it. You don't have to shout to be powerful. You simply have to know. Know who you are. Know what you stand for. Know that your vision is already alive within you, waiting to be revealed. When you stop asking for permission, everything changes. The world doesn't give permission to those who seek it. It gives opportunity to those who command it by their actions, their posture, their discipline. Every time you act with uncertainty, you send a message to the world that you're not ready. But when you move as if you are already becoming what you envision, you invite alignment. This is not about pretending, it's about becoming. When your internal state says CCT belong, the external world responds accordingly. Most people try to control the world by adjusting everything outside of them. They chase opportunities, bend their values, and compromise their identity just to be accepted. But that is not how the world bends. It bends only to those who have mastered themselves. The hidden law of power is simple: master your internal world, and the external world must follow. It's not magic, it's alignment, it's cause and effect. Your belief becomes your behavior. Your behavior becomes your influence, and your influence shapes your reality. The world doesn't move for the one who hesitates. It moves for the one who already knows where they're going, even if no one else understands the destination. When you carry yourself with purpose, people notice. When you act as if the outcome is inevitable, people believe you, because belief is contagious, energy is contagious, and leadership is nothing more than walking first with conviction. If you want the world to shift for you, then stop asking it to. Become the kind of person it cannot ignore. And remember, it's not about forcing the world to change. It's about becoming so rooted in who you are that the world has no choice but to move around you. People often confuse hope with action. They hope their situation will improve, that others will finally see their worth, that someday their moment will arrive. But hope alone is powerless without motion. The universe doesn't respond to static energy. It moves when you move. Certainty isn't born in waiting rooms. It's sculpted in motion, molded by risk, carved by courage. When you take bold action without guarantees, when you invest yourself into something unseen, that's when certainty sharpens. You start to trust your own ability to create outcomes rather than chase them. And in that trust, the world begins to reflect what you believe. You don't need everything to be perfect before you act. You need to decide that your cause is worth the discomfort, that your future is worth the growing pains. When that decision is made, truly made, you become magnetic, not because you have all the answers, but because you move like someone who knows they'll find them. Presence isn't taught in books or unlocked by external validation. It's the byproduct of deeply knowing yourself, your values, your vision, your direction. Most people are easily swayed because they never took the time to define themselves. When the winds of criticism or chaos blow, they stumble. But presence is what anchors you. It makes you immovable. It gives your words weight and your silence gravity. People lean in not because you demand it, but because they feel the steadiness behind your energy. Presence whispers something rare. This person is not searching. They've already found their path. And when you carry that frequency, the world instinctively listens. You don't need to prove your worth when you act from your core. That inner clarity becomes a signal that cuts through noise and confusion. The more you embody it, the less you need to seek approval. You simply become the kind of person others want to follow, not because you're trying, but because you've stopped trying to be anyone else. Permission is an invisible chain. It keeps people silent, passive, waiting for a sign that never comes. But once you see that permission is a construct, an illusion taught by systems that fear independent thought, you begin to reclaim your freedom. Every bold creator, every true leader, every revolution of progress started with one person who stopped asking and started becoming. The power to move forward without consensus is what separates the driven from the drifting. You don't need a crowd to validate your direction. In fact, the more original your path, the more resistance you will face. That's part of the journey. But when you stop outsourcing your decisions to others, when you no longer seek confirmation from the external, you activate something much deeper, self-leadership. And in a world full of imitation and noise, self-leadership is the rarest form of influence. It commands respect without raising its voice. It carves paths that others eventually follow. The moment you stop waiting for the green light is the moment you become the one who gives it. Trying to control the outside world is like trying to sculpt smoke. You'll exhaust yourself chasing shifting forms, never realizing that real power comes from the inside out. Your internal state, your thoughts, your beliefs, your energy sets the tone for everything you touch. When you believe you are small, you move in small ways. When you decide your voice matters, your presence changes rooms. It's not about manipulating people or forcing outcomes. It's about becoming so aligned with your inner purpose that everything you do resonates with clarity. That resonance creates results. It attracts support. It repels confusion. When you work on your internal architecture, your external world begins to mirror the strength and integrity you've built. That's why the most powerful transformation is never cosmetic. It doesn't start with branding or image. It starts with identity, quiet, grounded, immovable identity. Build that, and the world will recalibrate itself around your energy. Hesitation is the quiet killer of dreams. Every time you pause out of fear, self-doubt gains ground. Every delay becomes an excuse, and every excuse becomes a habit. But when you act with clarity, even in uncertainty, you begin to build momentum, and momentum is what breaks inertia. One small action taken with intention begins to shift everything. And soon, you're no longer reacting to life. You're directing it. You don't need 100 wins to walk with conviction. You need one moment of truth, one brave decision where you stop asking and start becoming. That's how the world begins to bend. Not in a single grand gesture, but in the quiet accumulation of decisive actions. Every step you take tells the universe you're serious. Every time you refuse to retreat, the universe removes one more obstacle. Not because it pities you, but because you've proven that you can handle the weight of your own vision. Most people walk into rooms hoping to be noticed, hoping someone will validate their worth, hoping the atmosphere changes in their favor. But those who shape the world don't hope, they decide. They decide that their presence carries value, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. That decision changes their posture, their energy, their words. It strips away the need to impress and replaces it with a calm certainty that cannot be faked. You don't need to take over the room. You just need to anchor yourself so deeply in purpose that people feel your stability. When you stop trying to be noticed and start focusing on being, the world begins to pay attention without you asking. This kind of internal alignment radiates a quiet, magnetic power. And it's not about ego, it's about ownership. Ownership of who you are, ownership of your path, ownership of your mission. And when that ownership becomes your default state, the world stops testing you and starts respecting you. Real influence begins long before anyone sees the results. It begins in the solitude of your choices, in the silence where you choose consistency over comfort, in the quiet moments when no one is watching but you still rise with discipline. This is where your internal kingdom is built, because the truth is, the world only mirrors what you already carry inside. If you feel unworthy, it will reflect rejection. If you feel grounded, it will respond with trust. If you move through life as though your vision is inevitable, you begin to make it so. Not just because of the actions you take, but because of the way you move through every moment. Influence, at its core, is an energetic posture. It's the result of repeatedly choosing to believe in yourself when doubt would be easier. It's the ability to hold your standard even when everything around you is falling short. And the more you hold it, the more the world aligns itself to match it. The world doesn't need another person waiting to be chosen. It needs someone bold enough to choose themselves. When you stop playing small, stop asking for permission, and stop deferring to external authorities, something within you awakens. You start to see that the walls you've been waiting to be opened were never locked. They were waiting for someone with enough conviction to walk through. Boldness isn't recklessness. It's clarity in motion. It's knowing your value so deeply that you're willing to face rejection, misunderstanding, or even failure, because standing in your truth matters more than fitting in. And here's the paradox. The more you stop seeking approval, the more you earn authentic respect. People may not always agree with you, but they'll feel your courage. They'll sense your leadership. Because the world doesn't follow the loudest voice. It follows the clearest one. And clarity comes when you stop looking outward and start listening to the inner guide that's been whispering all along. When you finally take responsibility for your energy, your thoughts, your identity, you reclaim control. No longer are you at the mercy of circumstances, moods, or other people's opinions. You become the cause, not the effect. Most people spend their lives reacting to the news, to gossip, to disappointment, to the moods of others. But reaction is slavery. Creation is freedom. And creation begins the moment you say, I decide. You decide who you are. You decide how you move. You decide what you allow in your space. And when you begin to live from that centered, deliberate space, everything external begins to bend. Not because you demanded it, but because you've built the internal force that makes it impossible not to. Life is not a random sequence of luck and loss. It's a mirror of what you expect, what you tolerate, and what you embody. When your energy becomes intentional, so does your life. The world rewards movement, not perfection. You don't need to have it all figured out to act. You just need the courage to begin. Waiting for certainty is how dreams wither. You build certainty by moving through uncertainty. Action breeds confidence. Every decision you make is a statement to life. I'm ready, I'm willing, I'm not here to be a spectator. And once you declare that, once your actions begin to match your vision, life begins to respond. Not always immediately, not always in the way you expect, but momentum builds silently at first. Then it compounds. Then it becomes undeniable. You must be willing to look foolish, to make mistakes, to be misunderstood, because the fear of embarrassment has silenced more dreams than failure ever could. But those who act boldly despite uncertainty are the ones who rise above the noise, not because they had fewer doubts, but because they refused to be ruled by them. You'll notice that when you stop moving with hesitation and begin moving with intention, people treat you differently, not because you've changed your voice or your wardrobe, but because they're reacting to your energy, your sense of self, your certainty, your unwavering direction. People are wired to respond to conviction. They feel it before they understand it. They sense whether you're operating from fear or from a deeper internal code. When you shift from needing approval to embodying value, people instinctively begin to reflect that value back to you. But it's not about manipulating their response. It's about mastering your own. When you're no longer driven by external noise, you carry a stillness that demands attention. This doesn't mean you become rigid or emotionless. It means your movement becomes deliberate, and your presence carries weight. People begin to adapt their tone around you, not because you ask them to, but because they feel the strength of your standard. And the beautiful part is, once you stop trying to convince the world of your worth, you actually start to live in it. You own it, you breathe it, and that is what bends the world to meet your level. And that's the secret so few understand. It's not the words, not the appearance, not the tactics that truly shift outcomes. It's the posture, the identity behind it all. The way you carry your truth as if it is already real, already valid, already whole. Most people spend their lives adjusting their outer world, polishing their appearance, tailoring their message, hoping it will earn them validation. But all of that is fragile unless the foundation within is unshakable. Build that foundation, and you won't need to adapt to every situation. The situations will begin to adapt to you. The people who appear most powerful are not those with the loudest voices, but those who know deep in their bones that they are enough. They have nothing to prove, and yet they prove everything through how they walk, speak, and move. The world bends not for the one who begs, not for the one who performs, but for the one who becomes. When you shift from seeking to embodying, you step into a different frequency. And that frequency is what shapes your reality. There is a moment, often quiet and unnoticed, where something within you shifts. It's not dramatic. No one claps. No spotlight appears. But something internal locks into place. You stop chasing validation not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. You begin to see that trying to control how the world sees you is a losing game. Your energy becomes too valuable to waste on people who haven't done the work to understand themselves, let alone understand you. So you shift. You stop speaking to be heard, and you start moving from alignment. You stop reacting to opinions and start anchoring into purpose. And in this shift, a quiet revolution begins inside you. You start to sense your own power, not in an inflated, boastful way, but in the calm, unshakable realization that you are your own permission slip. And with that understanding comes a kind of sovereignty. The world senses it too. They see that you no longer need their applause, and ironically, that's when they offer it. Because people follow clarity. They follow integrity. They follow those who have become whole, with or without the crowd. The bend of the world starts here, not with noise, but with a single decision to stop waiting. The truth is, people don't bend the world by being agreeable. They bend it by being consistent in their convictions. That's what real clarity gives you, not arrogance, but direction. Not dominance, but gravity. And gravity pulls. The world naturally organizes itself around those who are centered. It's not luck, it's a law. What you believe about yourself echoes through every part of your life. If your belief is fractured, your life feels chaotic. If your belief is rooted, your life reflects structure. This is why building internal certainty is the most essential and overlooked work. When you build it, people begin to sense it before you say a word. They feel it in your presence. They hear it in your tone. And they respond not because you asked, but because you became. Every outcome you seek externally is a shadow of something you first have to establish internally. Power, love, wealth, influence, they're all extensions of your self-image. So, don't chase outcomes. Build the foundation. Become the person outcomes orbit around. No matter how well you plan, no matter how well you execute, there will be moments where doubt creeps in. The difference between those who shift the world and those who shrink inside it is not the absence of doubt. It's the refusal to bow to it. Boldness isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to keep moving despite it. When you embody boldness, you don't need every answer up front. You simply trust that clarity will come in motion. Too many people freeze, waiting for full clarity before they act. But the truth is, full clarity doesn't come before you begin. It comes because you begin. It's shaped by experience, by mistakes, by adaptation. And every bold step you take tells your subconscious, we are moving, or we are becoming. The identity of a powerful person is forged in fire, not in fantasy. Every time you step forward when it's easier to sit still, you create a new pattern. And eventually, that pattern becomes who you are. You are no longer someone trying to be powerful. You are someone who walks in it. And in that walk, the world bends, not out of fear, but out of respect. Responsibility is not a burden, it's a superpower. When you stop blaming, you start building. When you stop waiting, you start rising. The world bends for those who take full ownership of their energy. Not partial, not conditional, full. You can't control every circumstance, but you can always control your response. You can't dictate every outcome, but you can define your character. That's what true control looks like. The moment you stop reacting to life and begin authoring your response to it, you become powerful. Not because you control others, but because you govern yourself. Self-governance is the highest form of discipline. And discipline isn't punishment, it's alignment. It's the daily act of honoring your values, your standards, your path. The world doesn't yield to the undisciplined. It yields to the one who is so rooted in their code that no storm can knock them off course. And here's the paradox. When you become immovable within, you become unstoppable without. The world isn't changed by people who wait for permission. It's changed by people who take responsibility for their frequency, their choices, and their direction. When momentum becomes your ally, you stop fearing stagnation. Every choice you make with clarity creates movement, and momentum, once built, becomes a kind of unseen ally. It pushes you forward when your strength wavers. It reminds you of the path you chose when distractions try to seduce you. And the beauty of momentum is that it doesn't require perfection. It just needs consistency. Action taken from clarity builds confidence, and confidence builds more action. This cycle creates acceleration. Eventually, the identity of trying fades away, and what's left is a person who simply does. They no longer need motivation. They've become the source of it. They don't look for permission. They create opportunity. They don't wait for doors to open. They build their own. This is how the world begins to bend, not through one massive leap, but through hundreds of quiet, committed steps taken by someone who has decided that retreat is no longer an option. Someone who has decided that becoming is not just a choice. It's their standard. What most never realize is that the world doesn't resist your power. It's simply waiting for you to claim it. So many live their lives quietly apologizing for their strength, hiding their voice, dimming their light in rooms that can't handle their shine. But your restraint doesn't protect others. It only limits you. You weren't born to blend in. You were born to embody a presence that disrupts mediocrity and demands elevation. And that begins the moment you stop asking, "Am I too much?" and start declaring, "This is who I am." Your authenticity is not a liability. It's a signal. It calls in the people, the opportunities, the challenges that match your level. And yes, it may repel some. It may unsettle the insecure. But you're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to make yourself free. And freedom doesn't come by shrinking. It comes by expanding, by owning your full capacity. When you step into that unapologetically, something shifts. People may not understand it, but they feel it. They sense that you're no longer playing a role. You're living a truth, and in a world drowning in performance, truth is magnetic. That magnetism is not about charm, it's about resonance. You become someone who no longer bends for the world. The world, sensing your unwavering alignment, begins to bend for you. So here is the final truth. The world bends for those who bend themselves first, not to others, but to a higher standard, to inner mastery, to a relentless commitment to becoming. When you decide to live from your deepest truth instead of your loudest fear, everything changes. The path becomes clear. The noise fades. The distractions lose their grip. Because now you are no longer driven by desperation. You are pulled by conviction. You don't hustle for identity. You live from it. You don't chase purpose. You walk in it. That is what changes the trajectory of a life. Not talent, not luck, but decision. A decision to rise above excuses. A decision to outgrow your former self. A decision to no longer delay the version of you that the world has been waiting for. Not because it owes you anything, but because you've finally become the kind of person who no longer waits. And when you reach that state of becoming, of deep ownership, the world doesn't just notice. It rearranges itself in response. Because now, you don't wish for power, you are it. The moment you stop diluting who you are to fit into spaces that were never meant for your expansion, something radical begins to occur. The world no longer sees you as optional. It begins to recognize you as essential. But this recognition doesn't come because you fought for attention. It comes because you stopped shrinking to be understood. You stopped molding yourself to the preferences of others and began embodying your truth with such quiet authority that people couldn't ignore it anymore. You didn't need to shout. You didn't need to sell. You simply became so deeply aligned with your essence that you became unforgettable. Because people may forget your achievements, they may forget your words, but they will never forget how your energy made them feel. And when your energy is clean, when your self-respect is intact, when your standard is non-negotiable, the world doesn't just take notice, it adjusts. It repositions. It begins to orbit around your gravity, not out of obligation, but out of instinct. Because we are all drawn to that which is true. And when you live in your truth fully, unapologetically, with reverence for your own path, the people who were meant to find you will arrive, not because you chased them, but because you became the kind of person worth finding. And now, as you stand in this truth, when reality becomes clear, power was never something to gain. It was something to remember. It was always in you, beneath the conditioning, beneath the doubt, beneath the years of being told to be quieter, softer, smaller. That power was waiting, not for the perfect moment, not for external permission, but for your decision. And when you choose it, truly choose it, everything that once seemed out of reach begins to move toward you. You realize that life is not about force, it's about frequency. And when your frequency rises to match your vision, resistance fades, doors open. Not because you forced them, but because they were always meant to open for the version of you who finally arrived. So let this be your reminder. You don't need to chase the world. You need to rise to the level where the world can finally see you. You don't need to beg for space. You need to become the presence that creates space. That's the shift. That's the moment everything bends. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally became undeniable. There will be moments when the world still doesn't respond right away. Moments when your growth feels invisible, when your energy is clean, but the results haven't caught up yet. And this is where most people give up. Not because they're weak, but because they don't understand that bending the world is a delayed reaction. It doesn't happen at the surface. It happens beneath it, in the unseen. The most powerful transformation takes place in silence, in solitude, in the spaces where no one is clapping and no one is watching. That's where your new identity is forged. That's where you reinforce who you've become, not by outcomes, but by decision. You keep showing up, not because life gave you a sign, but because you became the sign. And eventually something gives. The pressure builds, the alignment locks in, and the shift becomes visible. People start treating you differently, not because you asked, but because your presence now commands it. And you'll realize then that it was never about proving anything. It was about becoming something so true that the world had no choice but to respond. So don't rush the reward, trust the becoming, trust that the energy you lead with is always building something, even when you can't yet see it, because energy doesn't lie, and eventually the world always catches up to those who live in alignment. And that's the final lesson most never learn. The world bends not for noise, not for chaos, not for those constantly demanding attention, but for those who master themselves. Those who choose discipline when ease is tempting, who choose silence when noise is loud, who choose to stay the course when no one is watching. These are the people the world adjusts around, not because they yell the loudest, but because they become immovable. They are not asking to be chosen. They've already chosen themselves. And from that moment forward, everything changes, not overnight, not dramatically, but consistently, steadily, with a momentum that cannot be stopped. Because when you live from truth, everything false eventually falls away. What's left is real, solid, powerful, and that is what bends the world, not for a moment, but for a lifetime. You were never here to follow trends or seek permission. You were here to walk in such alignment that the world has to recalibrate to match your frequency. You were here to bend reality, not because of what you say, but because of who you become.